welcome yet again to another episode of Incraft's Design Sketching Lessons. In this episode we will be drawing a robot, a little bit of an 80s callback. As usual, we will start with a blank page and progress from there. So I first start by drawing a circle where the head will be as well as the torso. So for our little friend over here, I'm drawing inspiration from a lot of Hollywood movies. The whole idea is that this robot will be holding two canisters, in which he must choose in order to make himself a power source. I'm using human musculature right now to help me plan the parts and help me know exactly where each element will go, but this will quickly change into a completely different body to this. I always do this just to help me plan out. So right now it's very soft lines and it's just me figuring out what elements I will use. Right in the center of his body, this is where I'll put the power source. So it's these two coupling elements, one at the bottom, another one at the top, and I want to give this sense of confusion to the robot's face, so he doesn't know exactly which element to pick as a power source. A bit of a comic relief, I'm going to use these odd little parts for his body. So his clavicle is going to be made out of a bicycle shock. And right now I'm just drawing his hand that's holding the receptacle that's meant to be his fuel source. Right now I'm just going to make it look like a lava lamp, but it's really meant to be a plasma. Our robot is going to be a bit of a Frankenstein, so on his left arm you can see he's going to have these big claws, and the rest of his arm is quite a bit of a mixture between Robocop and the Terminator, to be honest. There's no rhyme or reason to all these cables. I'm just going to put whatever I think suits him best. And I'm using really light lines right now, no shadows, nothing. I mean, every mistake is not really a mistake, it's probably a good thing, because we just don't know what could work or not, so you can just draw whatever you want. Around the area where he's going to place his power source, he's going to have this sort of like a vertical clamshell type shielding to the power source. I mean, we don't want that to blow up, do we? Servo motors to make sure his arm opens and closes. It might seem like I'm going a bit overboard with it, but it's part of the fun to me. So his face has gotten a little bit of inspiration from C-3PO, as you can see. However, it will still come out quite different. On his right eye I will include an LCD screen. So this LCD screen is there to help us understand more or less what he's thinking. So little images or certain expressions would show up over there. And a nose piece. Our character is not 100% a robot. He's got a brain. He's got a human brain. And I really wanted to exposing half of his head. So one half has got the shielding half, the other is fully exposed. So to help us more or less just to convey the message that he's still putting himself together. And as a little bit more of comic relief, I just added a microscope's lens onto his other eye, so he can analyze his surroundings a lot better. Not sure how that would help, but still. Adding a bit more detail to the shielding for the fuel source. And a little bit of a full metal alpha color. So right now I'm focusing on his other arm, and again going back to comic reliefs, I'm using a barbecue tongs. So it's got a pressing system, and you probably found it lying around somewhere, and it's what you could use. And I'm envisioning how this power source will fit into that coupling area in the center of his chest. And I'm thinking more or less what sort of fiber we will use now. You could choose. I just went big and went straight for nuclear. So I am putting into consideration perspective and things in the foreground and in the background, and how some objects in the foreground would obviously appear much bigger than those in the background. So it doesn't have to be that big though, because he's just folding his arm at shoulder length or less than arm's length. Adding a bit of detailing in regards to how his tongue arm folds and how it bends, and his shoulders. So for something quite interesting as a means of defense that our character has, I've decided I will put some elbow blades right there below his thumbs. Anyone laughing at his tongue's arm will probably be very wary of the blades coming out of the other side. I've added another LCD screen as a belt this time, and there's these data cables coming out of it, and there's a little message on the LCD screen right now. It basically counts down in regards to seconds to how much power he has. So I just wrote there 5 seconds to shut down. A little bit more detail to his power source coupling. Some hydraulic legs for him. So thinking of maybe I could utilize another piece of junk. I'm just thinking about what else could I use as his other leg. Thinking about using a car differential, maybe. You know, if not a car differential, maybe the steering axle of a car. There's a couple cables running from the LCD screen to his spine, and there's your steering rack right there. It's probably coming from an old Ford. And just for good measure, a computer fan on the other side. I mean, you have to keep the CPU cool, so... his one eye, I've placed a couple interrogation marks, some question marks, just to evoke a little bit of confusion. And now I'm going to start adding elements to the background. A toaster with a sock in it. A broken TV from the 80s. A lot of the motif on this drawing is going to be based in the 80s as well, but I'm not going to go heavy into realism when it comes to detail. I just want to have fun right now. So a broken aerial. Right here on the other side I'll have a mop. These are all things you're bound to find inside a basement. Broken skateboard right there. And of course, the one thing you'll find in any basement, a missile. I'm trying to create this sheen effect onto the missile, so what I'll do, I'll shade a little bit with the pencil and I'll rub it in with my finger, and later on I'll be emphasizing these vertical lines from the missile all the way down. And right next to the missile I'm going to fill this as a little Easter egg for Salvador Dali. Points if you can guess the painting. And some books below it. So right now I'm going to go over with a Fineliner pen. I'm using a 0.3 thickness. The style that I'm trying to evoke here is a comic or a graphic novel type style. I'll go over all the lines that I just want to remain and then emphasize it much later. There's a lot of detail in this drawing. So with the Fineliner I begin to add a couple more details where I think I'd missed or where I think I did not go through at first, as well as going over all the lines. I also don't need to complete a line if I'm making any sense. If I think this will be a reflective material, a broken line or a set of broken lines would do fine, because I just want to convey that, you know, this material folds here or there or bends here or there, right, like what I'm doing with the nuclear fuel source right now. Once you're done with the drawing, if you take it to GIMP and you vectorize or you bitmap trace the lines, it will come out looking great. You can then take it to other software where you can start adding color and shadings. Start going over the coupling for the power. And the coupling shielding. top shoulder pads. As you do these claws, you start to imagine how these would fold, what sort of shape they should have. You know, if the claws are straight, you'd need to have a couple cut off bits on the finger's phalange, if I'm making any sense, where that would fit, where the tip of the finger would fit into the middle phalange if, you know, if the finger was straight. However, it's bending, and then you begin to sort of imagine how that would move or how the robot would grab the object. Screen and over the words. Seconds to shut down, 5, and so on, and it counts down. So right now it's really starting to take some shape. Although I'm not shading at all, just by creating these dark black lines you can start to imagine exactly where the shadows will go or where you want your light sources to be. But again, I'm having a bit of fun and I'm not going to worry about light sources or accuracy of shadows right now. And also don't forget your trusty mop. Also as a bit of inspiration, for those who don't know, the first Ninja Turtles cartoons were not cartoons actually, they were a comic strip, and they were far more violent from what we know the Ninja Turtles to be. And if I remember the comic style or the way they drew the characters in those comics, and the way the shadows worked in those comics, that is more or less what I want to mimic with this drawing. Now I'm erasing all those graphite lines and all those pencil lines. So we just left what's important. Regular 0.5mm black pen, whether it's gel or just normal ink pen, you start to go over the elements where you want this sort of just in darken areas of the body where most of the shadow would inhabit. So if you could imagine the shielding for the fuel cell coupling, they are bending backwards, so there will be a little bit of shadow coming from the inside of his body, which is what I'm doing right now. And then I would just start moving on to other parts and elements where I think maybe his own body would be casting a shadow over it. where I'm envisioning the light to be honest, is straight from the top going down. And he's going to be in this basement. Such as these inside the tongs arm, obviously this would be mostly in shadow, but just for the sake of showing that there's something going on under this arm, I would leave a little bit of a white line just above the black lines, just to show that, you know, there are these elements sitting together. And then the concave bottom of the nuclear power cell. And I keep applying shadows as if there was a light source right above the robot. It's like purely monochrome style with deep black solid shadows. leg steering rack now is getting the same shadow treatment. And now that the foreground is done, I'm going to focus in the background. I'll start with the toaster and television. To emphasize, to show which are the darkest reflections that are being created by the TV screen. Just shape the screen itself to shape the reflection. And the back of the TV. Mop. Skateboard at the back, and that pin for the kick plate is. Each of those strands must have their own shadow. So I'm adding shadow to some areas and not some on the mop, just to emphasize that it's undulating, so it just gives a bit more shape to the actual object itself. It's not coming down straight. And now onto the missile. I first apply with pencil and the ruler those vertical lines that I told you about. So I want to make it look shiny using the black pen, but first, just to help me guide the shininess of the missile, I'm going to use some rulers and then going over it with the black pen. And just where those lines intersect with the shadow, where the US Air Force insignia is, I'm just going to have a little, tiny little fin coming at the bottom. So it just adds a little bit more extra shape. And do not forget, wherever there is a black line and you gotta fill that area in black, just leave a white or an uncolored piece just before the black line, just to show that, you know, just to show continuity with that line itself. And you'll see what I mean. It has been plated onto the surface of the missile rather than just painted on. I mean, our character had to find a source for his nuclear energy. Never forget to use a piece of paper to protect your work. You don't want to smudge things. filming, but I'll see it when I put it at the end of this video. Just going over the question marks around his eye screen. To fill it in with red. And now with a 0.1mm fine liner, I'll just go over the plasma canister and other areas just to give a bit of shading onto it. Emphasize that there is something bubbling in there. Like surface, you can just glue it onto the top part of your skateboard, and what this does, it just ensures that you have friction on your feet. So all I've done, I've just went over it with a fine liner with very thin lines, and then going over it again with a pencil and smudging it just to in the center of the TV screen. I'll leave a white spot just to emphasize that this is a reflective surface. Also onto the toaster. Head. And finally the missile. Just to give it an extra sheen effect, I'm just going over the center of the missile, smudging it, and then slightly erasing around the center part of the missile just to, again, emphasize reflection. Now, our robot is in the basement of a very dirty place. However, there is a spotlight shining down on him. And I do want to emphasize that as well. So what I'll do is I'll draw a circle around him to show where the limits of the spotlight is, and I will build the areas around it in solid black. Now you have to be very careful when going around your objects. You do not paint on the edge, as you just saw right now. I just made a mistake and I had to correct it with a black pen. What you'll do, you just go about 4 millimeters shy of the edge of any object around it with the black marker, and you just fill in. very careful when navigating these bits and pieces. This sketch also reminds me of one of Tintin's covers. Can't exactly remember which story it was though. Black pen, and again, just about a line, you must be just about a line's thickness away from any black line to create that white line, just to show that there is an object in there. Because in truth, if you had to go with black all the way up against the edge of that line, you wouldn't be able to see it once the ink dries. Or the object that you're trying to paint would appear thinner than what it actually is. So it just ruins it. Symbol with the graphite with the pencil, and that's it. Our drawing is done. Now I'll put in the final product. I took it on to GIMP and I changed the contrast and the levels a bit so you can see it a lot better, and there you go. Alright, thank you for watching this lesson. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe, like the video, ring the little bell so you can get any notifications every time I put in a new video, and don't forget, keep on sketching.